Great. Well, welcome back, everyone. I know it was a short break, but I hope you were able to walk around, stretch those legs, and get ready for our next couple of sessions that we have planned for you for this afternoon or for this morning. Brian, you've got that embedded in my head now. Yes, we are indeed still in the morning. It is my honor to introduce to you Brian Knowler. He is the CEO and lead trainer for Knowler Consulting. The title of his presentation this morning is No Leader is an Island, Leaving a Legacy of Mentorship. Brian is a veteran police officer, retired lawyer, a speaker, and author involved in the justice system since 1994. He's also the CEO of Knowler Consulting and offering professional speaking, coaching, and specialized award-winning training on mental health leadership. Brian has published 2 books about his experience with trauma and leadership, entitled On the Other Side of Broken, One Cop's Battle with the Demon of PTSD, which was written in 2016 or published in 2016. And Career Suicide is Overrated in 2018. He is certified in several different peer support platforms and is a graduate of the Workplace Mental Health Leadership Program from Queen's University. Brian lives in Southwest Ontario and is married with 2 teenage sons. We are pleased to have him here this morning. Brian, welcome to the Crack and Eric presentations this morning.
Thank you, Doug. It's my pleasure to be here. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Elena, because she was the one who originally reached out to me and asked me about participating. So thank you, Elena, and thank you, Doug, for such a warm welcome. I am indeed coming to you from Southwest Ontario. I'm not sure what it's like in Alberta today, but here it's beautiful and sunny. I hope it is where you are as well. The miracle of modern, the miracle of technology. As much as I miss in-person training and in-person presentation, to being able to sit in my comfortable office, 4 provinces away and present to your groups today, I'm thrilled to be here. So thank you. So yeah, today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be talking about the concept of mentorship and how doing so can start to either create a legacy or enhance it, depending on where you are in your leadership journey at this point. So I'm going to start out with a little exercise. I'd like everybody to, I'm assuming most people are probably sitting at a desk or sitting somewhere where they can see the screen. If you're on audio only, I apologize, this won't have quite the impact. But so on the screen you see 100 squares, 10 rows of 10. I would ask that you either in your head or by counting on the screen, whatever you need to do, please start in the upper left corner with 1 and count left to right until you reach the square that would represent your current age. And I'll give, I'll say 1 minute to accomplish that, because I know it can be a little tough to do that when you're trying to do so virtually. So. And once you find that square that represents your current age, please mark it in your, please mark it down in your mind, or, put a dot on your screen or whatever the case may be, because you'll need that. I'm not going to be asking anyone their age, I promise. This is not part of the exercise. This is strictly for your own metrics. So once you've found the square that represents your age, I'd like you to count the squares between that square, and if you're male, the blue rectangle, and if you are female, the red rectangle, please. And I'd like to just advise that I mean no disrespect by using those terms. It's just the simplest under the circumstances. I'm well aware that there could be other identities out there, and if there are, I certainly understand that, and I apologize. It's not my intent to offend anyone. So once you have your number, and I'll tell you why those squares are where they are. The average age of death in Canada for a male is 80, which is the blue square. And the average age of death for female is the red square, 85. So the number of squares between where you are now and that blue or red square, depending, is the number of years you have left for your legacy. The number of Christmases, birthdays, vacations, visits with grandchildren, visits with family, that's the time that you have left. And I labeled this slide "Time is Fleeting," and that is indeed the case. When I did this, I was quite shocked to find how many squares I had left. And by no means is this is not an exercise in morbidity. I'm not trying to make anyone aware of their mortality. It's strictly to show that time goes by so quickly, and when you are involved and you're deep in the professional world, it seems even more so. So that is strictly a number for your, like I said, your own metrics to keep in mind as we go through the presentation. So leaders are naturally trailblazers, and we willingly tackle topics that other people tend to shy away from. And you should never be afraid of doing this as a leader, blazing that trail, whether it be following a path of another leader who you respect, or whether it means cutting your own path through the forest or through the jungle, whatever the case may be. But this is something we should never fear as leaders. And one topic that a lot of leaders don't give probably enough thought to, even though they might be living it day after day, is the concept of mentoring. And on both sides of the equation, both acting as a mentor and being in the role of mentee, and letting people who you trust and who you are loyal to mentor you. So there's two sides of this equation. And very, very shortly, I'll tell you my story of how I ended up where I am with regards to, yes, professionally, I'm a police officer and I love that job, but my true passion, after what I'm about to tell you, lies in mental health and leadership, in helping other people avoid pitfalls and helping other families avoid pitfalls that my family unfortunately experienced before we were able to finally get set back on our path. And mentorship and leadership played a tremendous role for me when the time came for that. So my story. So how I got to this point started back on a very cold October night in 2004. I was 5 years on as a police officer at the time, and I was acting in a supervisor capacity with my shift. And about 7 p.m., 7:30 p.m., like I said, it was a cold night. The roads were slick. It was typical, Southwest Ontario night. No snow. We've had that before, but no snow. And my platoon, my shift was dispatched to a call of a collision between a minivan and a pickup. And it was quite serious based on the caller, who said that the van looks like it had flipped over several times and it was now sitting there dark in the ditch. I happened to be the closest one, and I made my way there and went through my checklists in my head about what I would need to do and cover off as the supervisor, and what was I going to do when I got to the scene, and what if I had to do first aid. So the nice thing about a job like that is you just fall back on routine. When I got there, I could see a pickup, and I could see the driver next to the pickup, and he was waving. He was holding his arm, but he was waving towards the van and saying, "Go to the van, go to the van." Now, I found out later the driver of the pickup had a separated shoulder, so it was painful, but certainly not fatal. And my attention indeed needed to be on the van. So I made my way there. I had to go through a ditch full of water. It was quite cold. It was quite shocking when I went into it, and I made my way to the van. And as I got closer, I could see that the passenger side door was sprung open. The sliding door, the large door, was, you know, kind of stuck open, and very dark inside the van, like a cave. Anything that could be broken on the van was, I mean, glass was smashed, you know, headlights and plastic trim were smashed, windshield was shattered. The van had obviously taken severe damage. So I climbed in, and right away I was confronted with one driver lying on his back, bleeding severely. I won't go into a ton of detail because it's not that pertinent, but he's very severely injured. And my job was to stop that bleeding and you know, keep him going until the paramedics got there. So I did that, and I began talking to this person, just trying to reassure them, you know, I'm a police officer, I'm here, the ambulance is on the way, you know, stay with me. If you can hear me squeeze my hand, I got a very faint squeeze, which is always a good sign, right? The logical part of my brain knew that most likely this person wasn't going to survive. But the part that makes you put the uniform on, and the part that doesn't care about that logical part, knew I had to keep trying this. It wasn't my place to say, nope, there's no point. The person's too far gone. And after a couple of minutes, my eyes have now adjusted, and I'm holding this person very tightly into me, trying to put as much pressure as possible on the wound. And it's at that point that my eyes have been adjusted to the dark, and I can start to see through the blood and the glass and the debris stuck to this person. And I realize that I know him. And not only do I know him, he's one of my closest friends from university. And he's there in my arms, and his life is draining as I watch. And after about 30 seconds of being able to say his name and try and get some acknowledgement as to who he was, he died. He clinically died as I was holding him. Within about 30 seconds after that, the paramedics arrived. They took over the scene. They were able to resuscitate him. His name was Mike, my friend. And he never regained consciousness. They basically kept him in a comatose state and kept him alive until his family and friends were able to get there to the hospital and say goodbye and make arrangements and whatnot. So I went through the rest of the night in a daze. I finished the call. I made the call to Mike's wife that I was horribly dreading, and it was as awful as I thought it was going to be. I didn't really talk to anyone. I went home the next morning, and my routine was to go home, climb into bed, you know, check on my two boys who were very young at that time, like still, you know, crib and little boy bed size, talk to my wife for a couple minutes, and then, you know, crash. And that morning I did probably the worst thing I could have done, which was to grab a bottle of scotch and a glass and sit on the deck and consume 2 or 3 glasses quite rapidly. And that was the beginning of my downfall, because over the next 7, 8 years, I was slowly sinking deeper and deeper into a very black pit. We moved to Northern Ontario, so we moved away. It was for a promotion. We moved away from our resource. Our support base in Southern Ontario. I took on more responsibility. My wife took on more responsibility, went from being a teacher to being a school principal. We had growing kids. We just were busy with life. And I started to bubble myself off from my family, and I buried myself in work. And as things get closer to what I call, you know, the crash, I began relying on alcohol quite heavily, to the point where I was drinking every night. So, you know, 10 years ago around this time, I was, in essence, a very highly functioning alcoholic. I was not a good dad. I was not a great husband. I was not a great police officer. I thought I could do everything on my own. I knew something was wrong, but didn't want to probe too deeply. I thought it was my problem. It was my issue to solve on my own. And finally, perhaps inevitably, we moved again. We moved closer back to Southwest Ontario. So I thought, okay, this will be a reset. And unfortunately, it wasn't. and the same problems were there. Twice during this time, I contemplated committing suicide because I just didn't see an end to this blackness. And finally, one night during a conversation with my wife about the state of our marriage and the state of our lives, and, you know, you're not the guy I married, you're not the person I married, you know, what happened? I never know who's going to come through the door. I finally hit bottom as these images rolled through my head of my friend's death and other calls that I'd been to. And I finally broke, and I collapsed. I physically collapsed onto the couch, and I could do nothing but cry, not crying, weeping, like deep sobbing breaths. And for the first time in between, you know, bouts of crying, I was able to tell my wife what happened from start to finish, from the going to the call to what happened during those intervening years, during sleepless nights and nightmares and flashbacks and losing time and having panic attacks, all the way up to that night to stopping at the local liquor store to buy myself a bottle. And finally, you know, 3:30 in the morning rolls around, and I said, so now what? And my wife said, well, Brian, I love you. I don't like you very much right now, but I certainly love you. And I want you to be in my life, and I want you to be in the kids' lives, but you need to get some help or get out. And because I can't deal with your anger and your mood swings and your, you know, being in the basement with your video games and internet and, you know, Sportsnet and the drinking. My wife didn't know I was drinking. She had no idea. I hid it for probably 7 or 8 months until it came out. She said, I need you in my life. I want you in my life, but this can't go on. And for the first time that night, I said, yes, Kathy, I need help. Something is wrong. And it felt like a weight coming off, not off my shoulders, but from all the way down deep in my gut, just up, because now it was out, and now it was out there. And I couldn't say, well, no, you know, I was just kidding, or I couldn't say I'm not sure what it was, because I had clearly acknowledged there was a problem. And looking back, it took a lot of courage for my wife to do that, because we had just moved to a new home. She had just quit her job. But she was ready. She was ready to move back home with her parents and move with the kids, and if necessary, start a new life. And looking back, that's what I needed. I needed her to be that blunt, and I needed her to be that courageous person, because at the time I couldn't do it. I couldn't even pick out a shirt, a uniform shirt in the morning, and they were all the same. I had 12 shirts that were all short sleeve white shirts, and there was mornings I'd stand in front of the closet looking and couldn't pick out a shirt. So within a few days, I had seen a psychiatrist who very quickly diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress from that night of Mike's death, and then things added on to it. And, you know, that the subsequent 8 years of policing, I started a course of treatment that involved medication and talk therapy and writing and, you know, maintaining a good fitness regime, you know, eating well, a very holistic approach. My doctor was very good that way. And ultimately, it got to a point where I could start to relive the story without feeling like I was there again, just much like I did just with you folks right now and telling the story. The first time I ever told that story outside of talking to my wife and my doctor, it was to a college class of police students. And I had to stop like 8 times to compose myself. And then the next time 6, and the next time, you know, only 5. And now I can rattle it off because it's simply part of my life and part of my experience. But the most profound part of all this is not it certainly had an impact on my life. Absolutely. Physically, mentally, psychologically, emotionally. I had bridges I had to rebuild with friends and family and repair my relationship with my wife and my kids. But for as bad as it was, it also led to some major revelations and some major turning points for me. And one of those was starting to realize how much of an impact, you know, a couple years in hindsight, leadership had, because I had a very, very strong leader at work. My boss at work was a very strong leader. And when I told her, I'd worked for her for 3 days, I was that new, and I just, you know, regurgitated all this onto her desk that, oh my God, my marriage might be ending and I have this and blah, blah, blah. And she said, okay, we'll get through it together. That's what I needed to hear. She was a leader for me, my doctor, my wife, certain other peers who I knew had been through the same thing. Leaders form such an immense support system for me. And it was those people who reached down and helped pull me up out of that black pit. Because like I said, I certainly never asked for help. I was very arrogant. I was very egotistical, and I thought I could do it myself. And I had to crash and burn before I truly learned again. I'd always been a student of leadership all the way back to school. And then I kind of lost course. I lost my course during those 7 or 8 years. And I had to hit bottom like that before I bounced back. And that led me to lots of exploring and lots of interviews and lots of reading about mental health, about leadership, about mentoring. And I started to put this all together into one big ball, all geared around mental health, because that was something I became passionate about. Having been to those depths, I now know what people feel like when they get there. And one of the things that worked for me on both sides, both taking the wisdom of those who came before me and starting to pass it on, was this idea of mentoring. So what mentoring simplified is basically you're acting as a guide. In a professional setting, usually you are influencing the personal and the professional development and growth of someone you're mentoring. So what quite often people say, well, what's the difference between a coach and a mentor? So I am certified as a leadership coach. That means I work with people on short-term specific goals. So for example, you want to learn how to delegate authority better. Okay, for 8 weeks, let's work on that. And at the end of it, hopefully your skill set's improved. If not, let's tackle it again. Whereas mentoring generally is larger. It's touching more aspects of the person's life, and it can last for decades. I have very strong policing mentors who I started working with at the beginning of my career 24 years ago. And I still know if I need to, I could pick up the phone at 3 a.m. and call them and say, hey, I'm working through something. Can you help me with that? So mentorship can go on forever, and it truly is a lifelong endeavor. And that is where the legacy comes from. So the really great thing is that mentoring is absolutely a two-way street. You're both accepting coming at you and offering leadership, wisdom, knowledge, skills, abilities. Because it's impossible to teach someone and not learn from them as well. And the great thing is, sticking with this theme of legacy, the mentorship that you take and offer, not only do you benefit from that, but the people around you. And if you're setting an example, if you're, walking the talk, they will start to go, oh, okay, these leadership concepts, these are fantastic. This idea of mentoring, can we make this something more formal? And then you start to shape your organization. It truly is a chance to change a culture. It's not an overnight change, absolutely, and there's work to be done. But all it takes is one or two people who are willing to step away from the pack and say, you know what? Yes, we need some mentoring happening in this office. We need some, we need a mentoring program for our office or for our organization. And now I know obviously a lot of you out there do this, are mentors, and probably very good at it. My point today is simply to reinforce that alone can be such a powerful legacy that you leave, in your footsteps as a leader. So when you start your journey of leadership, and that could be at any age, you never start knowing everything. And guess what? We never will. We will never know everything there is to know about leadership. You could read every book, every blog, listen to every audiobook, scan every website, and you would still never learn everything, because some things in leadership just have to be experienced for you to actually learn from them. But the great thing is, leaders know where to find things. We know where to find resources and people and programming. So we don't need to know it all. And then we're really good at taking those pieces, those like chess pieces, and putting them onto the board. If I go to so I'm a critical incident commander in my other life. If I go to a call involving a hostage negotiation, I'm not going to try and negotiate with the hostage myself. I'm going to look at my negotiator and say, hey, how do we approach this? To do otherwise would be negligent. And it would be doing myself, my team, any potential victims, and that negotiator a disservice. That's why people specialize. Very, very few leaders will ever say they reached a position where they are on their own. They will all generally say they owe a debt to mentors and teachers. And the best leaders I've ever worked with readily and freely acknowledge that they, and some of them have accomplished amazing things, become, high levels of government or high levels of politics, or very successful in business. And they will all say they got where they were with help, with surrounding themselves with people who knew what they were doing, and that they accomplished those truly great deeds with the help of other people. And the great thing is, being able to, I think I changed, my apologies. Being able to use the wisdom and experiences of the people who came before you is a very powerful tool for not only learning, but for building your own resilience, or building your own, personal set of armor that helps you get through crises, that gets through the chaos of life. Because bouncing from, crisis to crisis is not sustainable. Eventually you need that armor, that resilience, to help take some of the force away from you, some of the impact away from you, so you can have time to reflect and debrief and, just ponder where you are in your journey. And just to build on that a bit, you should never, leadership is not something that should be left alone. I mean, there's a saying, it's lonely at the top. Well, that may be the case, but it doesn't have to be. If people choose to make it lonely, it becomes lonely. Attempting to tackle everything on your own, like I said, it does not only yourself a disservice, but your team and your own mental health and wellness. I mean, trying to take on the weight of the world on your own, and taking on everyone's burdens, plus your own, plus your home life, plus whatever else might be going on professionally, plus for the last almost year and a half, COVID, it simply can't be done. And again, this is where, in my case, my ego and my arrogance cost me so much, because I refused, even though I recognized something was wrong, I refused to ask for help, and it cost me so much. And quite often, opening the doors to the leaders in your life, to the mentors in your life, is such a crucial step to starting on a journey of healing and recovery. Like I said, after I hit that bottom and hit that wall, without, like I said, those people who put their hand down and help pull me up out of the pit, I don't know where I would be. I would still be probably in a very dark place. And if you truly believe in helping those around you, let them help you as well. There's benefit there too, because when you let the people around you help, it basically becomes a symbiosis. Not only are you being leveled up by the people who are, by the people who are helping prop you up, but you're helping them level up as well. Because when you do that, when you mentor someone, that's when you practice things that are so crucial to leadership: communication, empathy, self-reflection, compassion. It's just an endless loop of growth and learning. Like I said, you can't teach somebody without learning from them, and vice versa. It really is an ongoing, like I said, endless cycle or endless loop of growth and learning for both sides of the equation. Now, when most people start out on their leadership journey, you'll be seen as, the boss or the manager. And usually that's by necessity, or because you're taking over a new position, or a new position that's been created. The amazing thing is, leaders start to shine brightly and very quickly. And you'll start out being seen as a boss and be seen as a leader, because it can happen very quickly when people feel that you've proven yourself by building their trust and their respect. And as a leader, as a mentor, you're that puzzle piece. Your job is to build bridges. And when you build bridges between yourself and your teams every day, if your team knows that you have their back and you're supporting them on the small things that happen day to day, it's a pretty good odds that when something serious happens and a big crisis comes or a big deadline comes or a big crunch comes, you'll have their support as well, because they know that you've gone to bat for them. They know that you are willing to work with them and teach them and be that leader who, leadership isn't all unicorns and rainbows, right? There are times when you do have to put on your boss hat and, say no or discipline someone or, investigate a complaint. But even that can be done respectfully and with trust and with integrity. And if you carry yourself that way, man, there's no quicker way to start to build up the loyalty of your team. One mistake I've unfortunately seen many people who would aspire to leadership make is that they believe their rank or their title or the letters in front of their name equate to respect. And I'm sure there's people watching this who can shake their heads and think of at least one or two people. If you're trying to and use that kind of leadership, positional authority, or leading by intimidation or fear, people may listen to you, not because they're obligated. Not because they respect you, but because they're obligated to, and because they know that technically you could punish them, you could discipline them, you could make life very miserable for them. That's not leadership. That's dictatorship. And that is not the way to lead. And that is not the way to mentor, because nobody is going to want to learn at the feet of somebody who does nothing but act for their own self-interest. Now, one thing to remember too, mentors, people in mentor roles, they're good at their job. They're good at what they do. They have those skills that are so crucial to leadership. So it gets easy to forget when you started out, you didn't know what you know now. You didn't even know what you knew then. So it can be, if you slip into the trap of thinking, well, this person I'm mentoring should be in the same spot I should be. No. Knowledge is relative, just like I always say to people who are questioning, grappling with their mental health or trauma. Mental health is relative, trauma is relative. So this is where it starts to be really important to have some kind of structure for the mentoring relationship, whether it is a formal mentoring program where new leaders or people in new leadership roles are paired up with people who are higher up the chain or have been doing the job for longer, or whether it's those informal connections you make around the workplace or around your social circles or around hobbies or volunteering in the community. The great thing is mentoring comes in all shapes and sizes, and it can come in every area of your life. And the same goes for being a mentor. You can do that in any area of your life where people are willing to learn. And this is a point where having a broad perspective and a very wide worldview can play a huge role in your leadership toolkit, because leaders attract leaders, says John C. Maxwell, and he's absolutely correct. The great thing is that broad perspective lets you start, when you get to know your team and you get to know, who's who in the zoo, as I was told when I first started in a leadership role, you can start looking for the people on your team, the people you work with, who clearly are ready to step up and who exhibit the same kind of behavior of leaders that you respect and that got you to where you are yourself. It's a really, really smart practice to start observing on your team, who steps up during a crisis, who's on the same train of thought as you, who are the people who are willing to try new things versus, oh no, we've always done it this way. I hate those words so much. We've always done it this way. And in policing, there's a saying that cops hate two things: the way things are and change. So with that in mind, you can imagine how difficult it can be sometimes to generate change in my workplace. But I keep trying. I'm not ready to give up yet. Leaders thrive on not only surrounding themselves with other leaders, but with people who are aspiring to be leaders and who want to be taught and who want to start to learn, how can I make myself a better leader? How can I get ready for the next step of my career? How can I get myself ready for the next step of life, whether it be parenting or marriage, whatever the case may be, going off to university. Again, mentors come in all shapes and sizes and at all phases of your life. And the great thing is, just like I talked about that symbiosis, there's a great dual purpose here. When you as a leader, as a mentor, surround yourself with other leaders and other mentors, you're building a support system for yourself. There's so much to be said for being able to pick up the phone or jump on a Zoom call with someone and say, "Hey, I'm kind of eyeballing this project. What do you think about it? You've been there before. What do you think?" Or, "Hey, I feel like I let my team down. We had a meeting last week. A project fell apart, and I'm really feeling responsible for it. I want to start to rebuild. How are some ways I can do that?" And having that support system is important not only for your professional life, but your personal well-being and your self-care. Please trust me on this. Keeping your burdens and your stress bottled up and not sharing and not talking to anyone about it, be it family, professional, religious figure in your life, peer supporters, whatever the case may be. That, folks, is a sure way to start down the road to burnout or compassion fatigue or even worse. And again, I'm speaking from experience here. And when I look back, I get so mad because I can see opportunities I had to talk to people and to open up to people, my wife, close people at work, old friends from all the dating all the way back to high school. And I didn't take those opportunities. And I mean, hindsight, of course, is 2020, but looking back, I blew so many chances, and I never want to see people do the same thing. Open up to people when you get the chance. Let people take some of the burden off your shoulders when you get the chance. So, the title of my second book was Career Suicide is Overrated. And I include this because this is so crucial when you're working in the world of mental health and wellness. Your opinion, your acceptance of things, like I used the phrase earlier, your talking the walk, that creates buy-in. And that will help form the opinion of other people around you. If people like isn't necessarily part of leadership. I've worked for a lot of leaders who I would never socialize with them, but I trusted them and I was loyal to them. So there's a different thing. When people are loyal to you and people respect you, your acts and your words will help create buy-in for them. So very quickly, my career suicide story. In 2012, the Ombudsman of Ontario put out a report on the state of policing. The state of mental health and policing in Ontario. To make a long story short, my police service did not fare well. And we were told by our commanding staff, "Hey, look, this didn't go well for us. We need to talk about this. Please send the report out," because there was a very, about a 90-page report. "Please send the report out to your people. We need to start talking about this." And I thought, man, what better chance to finally, do this, to finally really take advantage of this. So not only did I send the report out to my officers I was supervising at the time, which is about 150, I, for the first time, told my story in a professional capacity, warts and all, marriage issue, problems with my marriage, problem with my relationship with my kids, the alcohol, everything. And I remember hovering my finger over that button before hitting send, and then finally going, yeah, send, and then going, oh my God, what did I do? And then within 10 minutes, I had my first reply. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this. Can I come talk to you tomorrow? And it just snowballed. And I ended up getting messages from other police services and then fire services and paramedics. And it just blew up far more than I ever thought it would. And then a couple of weeks later, I was at a meeting, a very large regional meeting, and I had 3 or 4 officers pull me aside who all outranked me. And they all said, "Hey, that was a really bad thing to do. You shouldn't be peeling back the blue curtain that way." One officer told me flat out, "You just committed career suicide." And I thought, well, if that's the case, then so be it, because I told my story and I slept well that night and I'm content with that. Now, almost 10 years later, it wasn't career suicide. I got back to the position I wanted. In fact, I'm happier now in my job than I was then. I was able to reset my life and reset my career. I've moved further ahead in advocacy and talking about mental health and talking about my story and talking about leadership. And that has led me to, relationships and moments that changed my life that I will always treasure, because I took that one step of sending that one email and being a little bit vulnerable and taking a chance that people would get it. And they did. And I will never regret that act of career suicide. In fact, I'll tell my story a million times if every time I do, one person lights up a little bit and goes, oh, okay, very cool. So career suicide is indeed overrated. If I hadn't committed that act of career suicide, I'm not quite sure where I would be now, but I know I wouldn't be as happy, and I know I wouldn't be as content. So the path that you blaze on this leadership journey, on this mentorship journey, will not be straight. There'll be turns and bumps and, blocks in the road. There'll be people who go out of their way to try and derail you. There might even be some really big detours, and you find yourself, turning off, 90 degrees left or right. But the really cool thing is, when you're on a road trip, if you get off the main highway and you take secondary roads or you take little country roads, the detours can put you in some of the most fascinating places you'll ever end up. And this journey of mentorship is the same. A detour is not necessarily a bad thing. Every road trip, every trip needs times to kind of slow down, reflect, rest, fuel up, however you'd like to put it. So taking a detour off your path is not a bad thing. And that road, I think, is pretty ideal, because it's not quite straight, but it's not really quite crooked either.
We would like to take a few questions, Brian, so maybe you can consider wrapping it up.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I can do that. So just to actually, let me see here. Yeah, so I can actually, I've got a couple more slides, and then I can finish this up, Elena. So the title comes back to no leader being an island. And it's an old saying by English poet John Donne. Nobody can be an island. You're not meant to be by yourself. And that's how I tried to conduct myself, was out in the ocean by myself. And even the biggest island can get swamped. And that's what happened to me over and over and over, until eventually I was tired of being cold and soaked, and I let those other leaders help me out of the water. And I started listening to what they had to say, and I let myself be mentored. And when I did that, that's when I got back on my own path. And let me just finish here. Yeah, I just wanted to get this out there really quickly, Elena. So as a way of saying thank you, I would like to, I'd like to leave you with something for your toolkit. If you go to that website, brianknoller.com, on the far right side at the top, there'll be a tab called Resources. Please click on that, and then click on the Erie C one. You'll get a password box. Type in mentor, lowercase, no quotes, and in there is some other material on these concepts and a couple previews of both of my books. And then just to finish, Isaac Newton had a very great quote that I love, and he was obviously a very well achieved scientist. And he said, "If I've seen further than others, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants." So in other words, I acknowledge those who came before me. And that is as true now as when he wrote it 350 years ago. So folks, I would urge you to always be your authentic self, be a giant, and be remembered for that. And thank you very much. And I would love to take some questions, Elena, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you,
And
Brian.
there's
That
my
was
smiling face again.
amazing.